My landlord kept my $1,400 deposit for 2 years, so I burned his entire business down, legally. I'm 26 years old, freshly out of a situationship that lasted 2 years too long, and I finally have enough saved to get my own place. Not a roommate situation, not my cousin's couch, my own apartment. I found it on Facebook Marketplace of all places. Third floor of a building in a quiet part of the city. 1 bedroom, decent kitchen, a bathroom that didn't make me want to cry. The listing said $850 a month. I called the number. A man named Gerald answered on the first ring. Gerald was in his mid-50s. He owned the building and 3 others nearby. When I met him to view the apartment, he showed up in a pickup truck with a custom license plate that said RENTKING. I should have known then. I should have turned around, gotten back in my car, and driven directly away. But the apartment was nice. Freshly painted white walls, new floors, working appliances, and I was desperate to have my own space. Gerald had me sign a 12-month lease, first month, last month, and a $1,400 security deposit. That last part stung. $1,400 is not a small amount of money when you're 26 and starting over, but I paid it, every cent. I documented everything before I moved in. I want you to remember this part because it becomes very important later. I walked through every room with my phone camera rolling. I narrated out loud as I went. The small scuff on the baseboard in the hallway, the paint chip above the bathroom mirror, the way the kitchen cabinet on the left didn't close all the way. I emailed the video to Gerald that same day with the subject line, "Move-in condition documentation, Unit 3C." He replied with one word, "Okay." I moved in that weekend. I hung my pictures carefully. I used the little plastic hooks that don't damage walls. I was so careful with that apartment because I needed that $1,400 back when the time came. And for a while, everything was fine. The first sign that Gerald was not a good landlord came in month 2. The heating unit in my bedroom started making a sound like it was auditioning for a horror movie, a deep grinding clank every 20 minutes or so. I texted Gerald. He said he'd send someone. Nobody came. I texted again a week later. He said the same thing. Nobody came. By December, I was sleeping in my living room with 3 blankets because the bedroom was dropping to around 58 degrees at night, and the sound was unbearable. I sent Gerald a formal written notice by email stating that the heating unit required repair and that I was documenting the issue. He called me immediately after that one. His tone had changed completely. He told me, and I am quoting this as accurately as I can, "You young people love to document everything. It's an old building, things happen. You want me to fix every little thing? You could just move somewhere nicer." I did not respond emotionally. I said, "Gerald, I just need the heat to work in my bedroom, that's all." He sent someone 3 weeks later. The guy looked at it for 10 minutes, said a part was broken, and left. He never came back. The grinding continued until February, when it mysteriously stopped on its own. This pattern repeated itself 4 more times over the course of my lease. Maintenance request, Gerald delays, nothing gets done, me sitting with the problem until it resolves itself or I fix it. The worst one was the mold. In month 8, I noticed something dark growing in the corner of my bathroom, behind where the toilet meets the wall. I got down and looked at it properly and my stomach dropped. It was not a small patch. When I pulled the toilet away from the wall slightly, and this took me about 30 seconds, I could see it had spread behind the baseboard all the way to the cabinet underneath the sink. Black mold in a bathroom with no window and a ventilation fan that hadn't worked since I moved in, which I had documented in my move-in video in month 1. I photographed everything, wide shots, close-ups. I used a ruler in the frame so you could see the scale. I emailed the video to Gerald that same day with the subject line, "Move-in condition documentation, Unit 3C." He replied with one word, "Okay." I moved in that weekend. I hung my pictures carefully. I used the little plastic hooks that don't damage walls. I was so careful with that apartment because I needed that $1,400 back when the time came. And for a while, everything was fine. Month 12 arrived. I gave Gerald 60 days written notice that I would not be renewing my lease. He acknowledged it. I spent 2 weeks deep cleaning that apartment. I repainted the walls the exact same white they had been when I arrived. I'd kept the paint code from the original can that was left in the closet. I filled the 2 tiny nail holes from my picture hooks with spackle and touched them up. When I handed Gerald the keys, he walked through the apartment for about 4 minutes. He didn't say much. He nodded. He said he'd process my deposit within 30 days as per the lease. That was the last time Gerald and I spoke for a very long time. Day 30 came and went. No deposit, no communication. I texted Gerald. He said he was still processing. I texted again at day 45. He said he was reviewing some things. Day 60, I sent a formal written demand by email. I quoted the relevant section of my state's landlord-tenant law, which requires security deposit returns within a specific number of days, along with an itemized statement of any deductions. In my state, the landlord owes double the deposit if they fail to comply. I stated this clearly. Gerald called me. His tone was completely different from any previous conversation. He told me I had left the apartment in unacceptable condition. He said the walls needed repainting. He said there was damage to the bathroom. He said the cleaning was insufficient. I calmly asked him to send me the itemized deductions in writing as required by law. He said he didn't need to explain himself to me. I asked again, and he hung up. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was a handwritten note on regular paper that said my deposit was being kept in full due to, and I quote, extensive damages and cleaning fees. No itemization, no photos, no receipts, nothing. I consulted with a tenant rights organization in my city. They confirmed what I already knew. Gerald was violating the law. I had strong grounds for small claims court. The double deposit penalty would mean he owed me $2,800 plus court fees if I won. But here is where I made a decision that I think about a lot. I could have filed in small claims immediately. I probably would have won, but I had watched Gerald over 12 months. I knew what kind of person he was. He would drag it out. He would miss court dates. He would appeal. He would make it as miserable and time-consuming as possible, even knowing he would lose, because people like Gerald have all the time in the world and they love making the process the punishment. So I decided to wait and to watch. 6 months after I moved out, I was venting about Gerald to a friend over dinner. She pulled out her phone and said, "Have you looked him up recently?" I had not. She searched the apartment address. Gerald had listed my old unit, Unit 3C, on Airbnb. The listing had been live for 3 months. He was charging $95 a night. The listing had 47 reviews. The overall rating was 4.8 stars. I read every review. Guests loved the location. They loved the newly renovated feel, which, I want to remind you, was the same renovation that existed when I moved in and which he claimed I had destroyed. The clean white walls. The clean white walls that I repainted. I felt something shift in me reading those reviews. Not just anger, something more focused. Because I realized in that moment that Gerald had kept my $1,400, claimed damages that didn't exist, and now was profiting off an apartment that I left in better condition than I found it, while paying zero consequence. And then I remembered the photos. I went through my phone that night. I had everything. The move-in video with my narration, the 12 mold photographs with the ruler for scale, the broken ventilation fan, the heating unit, the non-functional bathroom exhaust, all of it, dated, time-stamped, backed up to cloud storage. I want to tell you that what I did next felt calculated and cold. It wasn't. It felt completely, deeply satisfying in the way that only genuine justice can feel. I opened the Airbnb listing. There was a section for reviews from previous long-term tenants and neighbors. I wrote my review. I took my time with it. I was factual, specific, and I used the exact words that responsible guests would want to read before booking a place to sleep. I described the black mold I had found and photographed in month 8. I described its location and approximate size. I mentioned that the ventilation fan was non-functional and hadn't worked since I moved in, which I had documented in my move-in video in month 1. I mentioned that maintenance requests were routinely ignored. I stated that I had photographic documentation of all of this taken during my tenancy. I did not exaggerate a single thing. I did not use emotional language. I wrote it the way you would write a safety report, because that is what it was. Then I submitted it. Within 3 hours, Airbnb sent me a message asking for documentation. I sent them 11 of my 12 photos with timestamps. Within 48 hours, Gerald's listing was removed from the platform pending investigation. He called me from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did.